This is Ankita. Welcome to another video. If you're new here, welcome to my channel. I talk about books here, review them, recommend them. If that's something that you're looking for, please consider subscribing to my channel. In this video, I am neither reviewing nor recommending a book. I am instead going to talk about All Creatures Great and Small, specifically chapters 13 through 16. This is part of the spring read along. If you're not aware of it, I will leave the schedule in the description down below, and you can check out the schedule and join me to read this wonderful, entertaining, laugh out loud, funny book. All right, so without further ado, let's jump into the video. Let's talk about chapter 13. Oh my goodness, this is a chapter I am forever going to remember for the rest of my life, and it is the funniest. I know dog owners can be some of the most funny people out there. Their love for their dogs just sometimes is another level, and you can see that in case of Mrs. Pumphrey and her dog Tricky Woo, and how Herriot becomes the uncle of Tricky Woo, who is a Pekingese. Correct me if I'm saying that wrong, but yeah, that was delightful, wasn't it? And let's talk about the conditions that he suffers from. He goes cracker dog, flopbot. The most insane part is that Herriot writes a letter to Tricky Woo, and yeah, we see a different side of Herriot, don't we? We see how he, to please his patient, which is the dog, but obviously the dog cannot read a letter. It's obviously Mrs. Pumphrey who will be pleased, and she will continue being hospitable to him, which is to his advantage, isn't it? Because she is wealthy and she offers him drinks and the comforts. Quite interesting. I loved it. I loved the character of Tricky Woo and Mrs. Pumphrey. Chapter 14 is when we see another new character in chapter 14, and that is Miss Harbottle. The explanation why Siegfried Vernon prefers to hire an older secretary, an older woman, as opposed to a younger one, was absolutely spot on. But also, I thought the way James describes Tristan's reaction and his utter disbelief and puzzlement as to he couldn't see any cons of hiring a younger woman, obviously, but his brother Siegfried is he wants someone who will be more efficient, and we see how that goes, don't we? Chapter 15 was hilarious. Siegfried decides to keep hens and pigs. Tristan is not too stoked by it. He is given charge of the hens and the pigs, and we see what happens to the hens. He is not really interested in feeding them, but he's interested in the characters, the characteristics of the hen. He's not at all interested in feeding them. So the hens don't lay any eggs. And Siegfried, when he gives them away to Mrs. Dale, he then hears that the hens are producing eggs wonderfully. I wasn't surprised by this. I wouldn't have expected anything other than this from Tristan. And then I was like, what happened to the pigs? And we find out about the pigs in chapter 16. The pigs make an escape. Tristan goes to bring them back, and the entire marketplace is shaken. And just when he rounds up all the pigs and gets them back, the horse escapes, and Tristan puts his foot down. He is utterly exhausted and he has given up, and he refuses to get the horse back. And the stock keeping comes to an end. In the next chapter, chapter 17, Miss Harbottle points out a series of errors that Siegfried has been making at his practice in Skeldale House, and she points out his poor handwriting, his taking cash from the petty cash box, and not answering her questions so that she can do her job well. All of this we see, and Siegfried is utterly terrified of Miss Harbottle because she is the only person who has been able to point this out to him. Siegfried takes no accountability of all the errors that he makes, all of his shortcomings, no accountability at all. Instead, in chapter 20, he turns on Miss Harbottle and blames her basically for everything. And then again in chapter 23, we see this kind of like a power struggle between Siegfried and Miss Harbottle. Harbottle is a really strong woman. She is having none of it from Siegfried. Have you ever had a boss or a colleague who wouldn't do their job, but they would be the first ones to point out if you are unable to do a job because they didn't do something? Yeah, I certainly worked with such people, and I like Miss Harbottle's technique of dealing with difficult difficult employers like Siegfried. All right, where were we? Chapter 17. Yeah, chapter 18. Yeah, this one is like Herriot having an imposter syndrome kind of thing happening in chapter 18, where it has been 6 months that he has been treating animals in the Dales, and he still feels like he doesn't know much. His fear of horses has stayed with him, hasn't it? We see that in chapter... Oh, we'll come to that, but we see that later on, right, in one of the chapters where he is utterly terrified of this huge horse. Chapter 19. I know it's a little bit sunny here, but this is the only position where I look at the camera and there's no glare on my glasses. So I'm sorry for the changing light. It's partially cloudy today and it's a very cold spring day. But anyway, we're gonna get on with all things great and small. In chapter 18, Harry gets an invitation from Tricky Boo. She's obviously Mrs. Pumphrey, who's writing under his name. And he gets invited for drinks and dance. And I absolutely love that comparison of how when he is at the party, at this luxurious party, he washes his hands with this luxury soap, and later on the same day in the middle of the night he is called upon to deliver piglets, right, to help us deliver piglets. And the contrast, he goes out in the cold and he tries to wash his hands with this soap which he believes is super old and it doesn't lather up, it doesn't do much. But yeah, the contrast between how the variety of experiences he has as a vet is really interesting, isn't it? Yeah, I absolutely love the invitation. Tricky requests the pleasure of Uncle Harriet's company on Friday, February 5th. Drinks and dancing. I thought that was just so sweet. I love dog owners. I love this one line, which is at the very end of page 149 in the Pan Macmillan edition. It's chapter 19. Herriot recalls one of his teachers saying that if you decide to become a veterinary surgeon, you will never grow rich, but you will have a life of endless interest and variety. Yeah, chapter 20, I think I already spoke about how Siegfried refuses to take any accountability of his mismanagement of the books and the receipts and everything at his practice, and he blames Miss Harbottle instead. Yeah, I felt really sorry for the woman who is trying to help him. She's just doing her job. Chapter 21 is when Tristan is given the responsibility of looking after this recovering Labrador who was put under for a surgery, and now he hasn't fully come around, so he is moaning and howling while he is recovering. And I feel sorry for Tristan. He always ends up being responsible for things that are so difficult, and probably because he is lazy and his brother just wants him to become more active, to, you know, do his share of the work. But I feel sorry for him. He is given the responsibility of looking after this Labrador, and yeah, he ends up taking care of him throughout the night, and poor Tristan hasn't had even a wink of sleep. Must be difficult, but yeah, someone has to do the job. And I wonder why Siegfried doesn't do these jobs himself. You know, he wanted to keep the hens and the pigs, and why didn't he take up the responsibility of feeding the hens and the pigs? Probably because he's attending calls throughout the day, but you know, it was his idea. He should at least supervise. And then in the next chapter, chapter 22, we see that Vernon sends Herriot to this really grumpy guy, Angus Grier. I guess this is one of the perks of being the boss, is that you get to designate all these difficult tasks to the assistant. or the brother, you know. And yeah, we see that Grier makes Harriet wear this ridiculous suit only to hand him over a pessary. His job was just to hand over an equipment, but he was made to wear this ridiculous suit for that, and the farmers were really amused. Chapter 23. Harriet is describing all of his experiences with the cold days, and one of his experiences is treating this cow who had milk fever, and how he has to get into all the muck and water to help this cow. And he does, and Mrs. Cooper is really kind. She feeds him, helps him get all warm. It was really nice to read that part. And when Harriet is back at the surgery, he witnesses this power struggle between Miss Harbottle and Harriet, and he wonders that it isn't really that bad to be an assistant. Chapter 24 is again Tristan. Poor Tristan. But Tristan is also not a straightforward fellow, is he? He has decided to go to a dance. However, Sigfrid wants him to visit his mother because there's someone coming over at Skeldale. Tristan is like, no, there's no way I'm going to visit mother tonight. No matter who comes to visit Skeldale, I am not leaving. Why should I be the one to leave all the time? So he puts his foot down, and he thinks of making up an excuse that there were no trains to Broughton, I guess, right? To Broughton that night. So he didn't leave, but he's all dressed up in his suit to go for a lovely dance. Sigfrid is not gonna let that happen. Sigfrid instead sends him to treat a pig's ear. This entire scene was really funny, and I just love how Tristan is always made to do all these difficult tasks, but the way he gets out of them, either he gets out of them or the way he performs these tasks, is absolutely hilarious. Chapter 25 is when spring has arrived in the Dales, and Harriet is busy with lambing, but it's also a season of castrations. And this is when Harriet has to face his fear of horses, and poor guy gets kicked in his thigh. But I like how he says that he found out from the whole experience, he learns that the fear is worse than the reality. Yeah, I thought that was a good lesson that he took from that. It must be terrifying to treat horses who you know, any animal, they are really unpredictable. So yeah, it must be really difficult to treat an animal, so you don't really know what kind of temperament the animal has, right? So it's a tricky job. Chapter 26. Yeah, I love this chapter so much. I thought it was hilarious how he treats Finn Calvert's cows with Epsom salts and Bull with cold water because he has had sunstroke. It just shows, right, that sometimes you just have to lean on these simple, like, ancient remedies. I'm glad Harriet does that, and the farmer is super impressed, which is great. I am loving this so much. I have no idea how many chapters we are going to read next time, but I'll put that in the description down below. Please check that out. Let me know what your thoughts are of these chapters, or all the chapters that you've read so far. I would love to know. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel and like this video, and I'll see you next time. Until then, take care. Bye bye.